Bartenders, what are some crazy stories you have about the crap drunk people do to you or others at the bar? I used to work at weddings. It was amazing how often the most rude person there would be the bride. Something about them feeling it's their special day makes them think they're entitled to act like an idiot to just about everyone. My favorite was when the bride had a drink bought for her, but was chewing gum. Why anyone would chew gum at their wedding is beyond me. Her husband held out his hand and offered to take it. She snaps back, "I can do it myself, thanks," then proceeds to waddle over to the bar, spits it right in the tip jar. Groom walks over and apologizes. I was tempted to look at his ring and say, "No, I'm sorry." Story 2. I have a regular that comes in and orders a Budweiser, sits at the bar, opens a book and reads it. No matter how packed it is or loud the music gets, bar fight or not, his eyes never leaves that book. He gets annihilated too. I will never understand how he can concentrate. Story 3. My old, overly friendly boss urged us to come out from the bar to hug the ladies and shake hands with the men. One day I was urged to hug an extremely fat woman who then complained to my boss that my arms were too short to fit around her. She called me a little T-Rex. Now, people jokingly call me J-Rex, leave dinosaur-related things in my tip jar, and walk around like T-Rexes. One time I looked up for my drink mixing, and someone had convinced a group of 7 teenagers to parade back and forth like T-Rex in front of the large windows at the front of the restaurant. This crap has been happening for years. Story 4. I had these 2 idiots come in with a girl whom one of the guys was dating. They go straight to the bathroom downstairs while she orders a pitcher of beer. It's a busy night, so I don't notice them get upstairs and immediately chug the pitcher. Less than 3 minutes after getting the pitcher, she's asking for another. At this point, I see that they both are loaded, and I cut them off and make her pay the tab. Within moments, I'm being attacked by 2 dudes trying to climb over the bar. They're reaching for the knife I used to pare fruit with or anything they can get their hands on. Thankfully, they had no idea that there was a buddy of mine, who was a cop, sitting having a chill pint with a buddy. He immediately interjects and I and his buddy bounce them pretty quick. This is where it gets amazing. They proceed to call up their buddies who show up, in record time, mind you, in a tiny, and I mean tiny, car that sees like 8 people pile out. It was like a clown car show. They then proceed to go into an alley a couple of doors down to plot their revenge. What they don't know at that moment is that my buddy the cop called in backup. That was Root. After a few minutes of audible plotting, the first 2 and their girl come out of the alley and proceed to try and pick a fight with my buddy the cop and his friend. The cop's like, "You don't want to do that. Just go home." Just then, one of the dudes tries to sucker punch the cop's buddy, but is so drunk that he ends up punching the cop in the face and crap breaks out. Drunk dude number 1 is ripping of his shirt while his girl is screaming, "Get him, baby!" And drunk dude number 2 is retreating to the alley where number 1 and his lady friend end up eventually joining him. While this is happening, and unbeknownst to those in the alley plotting threat level midnight-style revenge, 4 cruisers show up full of piss and vinegar ready to duck some drunk cop punching assholes up. Then, cue Flight of the Valkyries. Really, words can never do justice to what unfolded shortly thereafter. There arose a Braveheart-like cry from the alley as 10 idiots came storming out with pocket knives, tire irons, ready to duck crap up. The looks on their faces were priceless when they realized the battalion of cops just waiting for them around the corner. I saw this in real time, and I crap you not. I hearken back to that moment specifically, the looks on their faces, when any day I'm living is absolute crap. Just to remember that I will never laugh as hard as I did in that moment. In their moment of realization that they were truly, truly ducked beyond any of their wildest imaginations. The cops took them out and them cuffed in what seemed like a lightning flash. Memories. Oh, and duck those guys. I'm still stoked that they got instant karma, comeuppance like no other, but it is crap like this that makes me not miss bartending. Story 5. One office came to our place for a Christmas party. We're a wine bar in the city. One of the girls started kissing the other for a dare. Then she left that one and went to another one, even though it wasn't part of the dare. And the other one went and kissed another one, and they all went around kissing each other. The guys from the Christmas party just stood there in awe with their mouths wide open. Story 6. Girls get really offended if you refuse to give them your number. I had a boyfriend at the time, which weirdly made it worse because then it became a challenge to turn me straight or set me up with their gay best mate. Story 7. Sober story, but still one of the weirder ones. I had a guy come in and walk up to his wife who had been at the bar for a while, with a guy we all knew she was seeing. He slammed divorce papers down on the bar in front of her, made a big scene of it. What was stranger still was that he then went to the hostess and got seated to have dinner in the same restaurant. To echo what others have said, we also had a guy crap his pants. But that was an old man on the way to the restroom. Story 8. I cut a girl off because she was wasted and she started crying because she couldn't drink. It was awesome. And then her friends started acting like idiots about it, so I told them none of them could have anything else. They all started yelling and what have you, and I just kept smiling and nodding until they got confused and left. I love cutting people off. I volunteered to do that. Story 9. Second night working at my college bar, some girl pooped on the floor, picked it up, and threw it up on the ceiling. Third week of work, every girl decided to crap in the same toilet for 5 straight hours while adding new layers of toilet paper and tampons without flushing it in between. Those were some dark days. Story 10. I was a server at a tropical-themed burger joint. One night, we had a couple of guys show up late, and they were hammered. One guy was 50 or so, and the other was maybe 65. The bartender slipped them a couple of dummy drinks, and we figured they would finish up and be on their way. Instead, one of the guys threw his glass across the bar. The manager, me, and one of the cooks confronted them and asked them to leave. We are all in our 20s at this time, and none of us were under 200 pounds. These two guys stand up, and the younger guy says, "We can take them." Then the 65-year-old stumbled sideways, knocked over 2 tables, and cracked his head on the floor. Our host called the police, and the younger guy kept running his mouth while his buddy was bleeding out. In the end, the younger guy got arrested, and the older guy ended up being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. When I left for the night, I noticed that the 15-year-old Ford Escort they arrived in wasn't even parked in a space. They parked in the middle of the driving lane, so we had their car towed. One of the cops came back a month later to eat, and he told us the older guy almost died from the head trauma, and the younger guy was on parole. He ended up back in prison. Story 11. To be honest, just about any time you have to cut someone off, it gets crazy, weird. People just don't get it. I don't want to cut them off because I probably won't get a tip, and that also means I can't sell you more alcohol. Most recently, this guy, who must have been in his 70s, kept buying drinks for girls at the bar. What made it weird is that he would buy a guy's girlfriend a drink and tell the guy he could buy his own. He became aggressive about it after a while, and I cut him off. He insisted on seeing the top manager. I told him I was the bar manager, but he wouldn't accept that. I called over the assistant manager, who is not my boss, to appease him, who proceeded to tell him that he had to pay his tab now or we would just call the police. The guy then said he would only pay for the drinks that he had, $20 of the $80 tab, until we once again informed him that we have a very good relationship with local police and it would be in his best interest to just pay and leave. He paid, looked at me and said, "Here's a tip, $20, and said, "I am not an asshole like you." I offered to call him a cab and he said, "Duck off," and left. One girl who had been alone at the bar and sat next to him called the next day saying that she thought she had been high. This is just one example. A non-service industry person could not imagine the crap we have to put up with. I agree, most of us are just big babies, but many of us have seen some crap. Story 12. Once came across a 20-something guy blocking anyone from entering our downstairs arcade room. He was just standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, doing the drunk sway. And when I tried to go around him, he just moved to the left or right to block me, while maintaining alpha as duck eye contact. I asked him why he wasn't letting me in, and he says, "It's a security issue." I said, "Well, I work here. Can I get by?" To which he responds, "I work here too." The guy's pupils are the size of dinner plates, I realize. I say, "Okay," then start heading back upstairs, and he follows me sort of menacingly, maybe halfway up the stairs before going back to the doorway. I get some guys from the kitchen to help me out, and we do our best to just keep the guy calmly detained in the arcade room until the police arrive to sort things out. While we waited for the cops, the guy said something about some group of people trying to poison him, and he referred to me and my coworkers as agents a couple of times. I felt pretty bad for the guy after that. Cops came and I think helped him find some friends who he'd been separated from. Story 13. I have a story about a crazy ducking bartender. I'll call her Kirsten. She was widely known as a complete idiot. She would make fun of male customers for ordering Blue Moon or Bud Light. She would push people to hurry up and drink their drink so she could pour them another one. She was just an all-around asshole. One day, this poor guy comes in looking like he just got dumped or saw his dog run over. He sits at the bar and orders a drink. He quietly drinks his drink and leaves what is obviously all the money he has for a tip, a handful of change. Kirsten, she rakes it all off the counter and into her hand and throws it in the guy's face. And she threw it pretty hard too. My friend Scott says, "What the duck, Kirsten?" Later, I have a cigarette outside and my other buddy, a cook there, comes out to smoke with me. I told him what happened and the next day I heard she was fired. Story 14. Let me tell you the story about crap pants. I used to work at a restaurant near a pretty affluent neighborhood before the economy went to crap in 2008. We were near the local tennis club, so having these trophy wives in and swooning over their tennis pro was not uncommon. One day, 4 of the tennis ladies come in for Appletinas. They down the first couple relatively quickly and take their third round and walk away from the bar. I assume they're heading out to smoke, but they weren't. Turns out they went to hang out at the other side of the restaurant, which is closed between lunch and dinner. I found out when I overheard someone talking about 2 women going at it in one of the booths. Of course, everyone made sure to get an eyeful of live girl-on-girl action, but that was quickly interrupted by the fact that the blonde was not feeling well. They stepped outside, and I figured they would come inside, pay their tab, and that would be the end of that. They came back inside, 3 girls carrying one right into the bathroom. As soon as I saw it happen, I knew I would have hell to clean up. And sure enough, when they left the bathroom, I was attending other bar guests. One of the servers coming on for the dinner shift was the first to see it. Crap. Crap everywhere. Literal feces on the floor, on the walls. It was terrible. I will be in that server's debt forever because she wasn't scared to clean it. She just said, "I'll handle it," and did. I figured it was over. And again, I was wrong. The manager who came on for the night shift was taking a walk around the restaurant when he saw it. Crap. Crap again. Crap on the floor in the game room of the restaurant. We rewound the cameras to see how this could have happened. It seems that while she was being carried in, she couldn't hold her poop and it just started coming out, and she kind of shook her leg a little to get it out of her underwear. We named her Crap Pants and told the story to every new server. Did she stop coming around? Yeah, for a while, but then she just started coming around again with her kids as if nothing ever happened. If you crap your pants in a restaurant, everyone will know about it, and it will never be safe to return. Story 15. All right, kids, story time. 1. I used to work in a fancy upmarket resto pub, whatchamacallit, as a bartender during uni. Usually the place was fairly posh, and we once had Maroon 5 in. Our hard-as-nails manager became a pile of giggly fangirl when he saw Adam Levine. But I digress. One Saturday night, we had a party of Australian chiropractors. They booked out the entire place. There was a dance floor, Boney M impersonator, champagne and wine up the wazoo, the works. Naturally, everyone gets plastered, and I get asked if I like cricket a lot. I'm Indian, and I don't. Asked to sing songs with them. I sang Land Down Under, and basically the lot of them were very pally. Aussies, you never know what to expect. End of the night, there's a very attractive blonde lady that has been knocking down G&Ts, like they were going to ban the stuff, for hours at the bar. She's been progressively getting worse as the night goes on, and in the end, it turns out she was an escort who one Cairo had taken to the party and then immediately forgotten about. She's there when we're closing up and cleaning. The manager tells me to get her a cab. I escort the escort outside, and she reaches up to my face, feels my beard, grabs a hold of my ear and says, and I paraphrase, "Don't let anyone tell you what you should do. Hear me?" Strokes the beard again and gets into the cab. I often think of her. I left the job soon after, too. This is more of a story from my mate who was drinking one New Year's. Got to a point where he was going to hurl. He just started saying, I need a retest. Bucket, damn it. And then proceeded to puke his guts out. He was trying to say receptacle. 3. I once called a girl a bottle of Fanta because her fake tan made her orange, and she was wearing an orange tube top with a fascinator on top. I nearly got punched for it. If it wasn't for a mate pulling me out of the way, no regrets. Story 16. When I bartended in SF, I remember this guy who happened to be a liquor rep from Southern California, gave us his card and everything, got super trashed at my bar. It's a pretty nice place, but we had really nice booze and cocktails, so it was easy to go overboard. Anyway, he goes to the restroom, which we only have one for each gender. It was busy, so it's not like this was conspicuous, and we were pretty aware that lots of substances /sex /etc. probably happened in there, but we kept it tidy. Well, what do you know? He's in there for too long. Somehow my manager had lost or didn't remember where the spare key was. We actually had a regular customer who bartended elsewhere on the street pick the lock with a paperclip. Long story short, this guy is passed out in there with the mirror, which was wall-mounted, lying flat on the ground with what appears to be urine all over it. I think he was on the john with his pants down. I think the conclusion we drew was he was on some sort of substances and decided he wanted to watch himself piss. I've heard of this kind of thing on hallucinogens, but I can't imagine he was tripping at a packed bar, but who knows. Anyway, we get him put together as best we can, kick him out, where he acts super offended, and I think he tries to fight my manager. It was late at this point, so I don't really remember the details. What I do remember was we had his business card, so my GM calls his boss the next day and demands that they pay for the mirror and whatever other damages, and of course that his behavior makes us definitely not want to buy whatever brand he was hawking at that time. There are tons of stories from that time that are slowly oozing into the nether from my brain, but this one always pops into my head when someone asks about crazy bartending stories. Story 17. Once I walked in on a guy dressed in heels, hose, and a skirt, shoving a tampon inside in the women's bathroom. We got some complaints, so I had to go check it out, and there he was, ass up, bent over the counter like he wanted to be watched. We had a problem with purse snatchers for a while. The worst was the time a guy collapsed and the paramedics had to come in to check him out. While they were working, some crap-ass stole their defibrillator bag. Story 18. Worked at a sports bar for 3 years between studies and a full-time job. Most weekends were fairly normal, but I do have some stories. One Christmas we had to wear Santa hats and I was out glass collecting since it was busy. Sweet little old man pulled me to the side and asked if the bell in my hat rung. I shook my head and he said, "Well, you're making mine ring," and I had the face of horror. Bad, sweet-looking old man, bad. Worked during a huge sporting event. Football, not US football. England versus Germany in the finals. So we were at our busiest. You couldn't even glass collect, the crowd was that dense. The channel all the TVs were on proceeded to cut to an advert. Just as England scored its first goal, the whole bar went into uproar, and it was the legit scariest thing I'd ever seen. Like, imagine being trapped behind a bar and hordes of zombies were screaming to kill you. Lasted like 10 or so seconds, but felt like a lifetime. The bar would close at around midnight, and the upstairs bar, second bar, would stay open until about 2 to 3 a.m. Working the upstairs bar was far worse. So many middle-aged women do not wear underwear and like to request piggybacks. This was like a regular every weekend thing too. So many people dragged out for sex and all other things. They'd be full-on rubbing over clothes on the dance floor in full view of everyone. Fully naked couple have been dragged out of the men's bathroom. Bar bathrooms get super nasty, so I don't see why anyone would want to duck on the floor beside the wall urinal. Often when outglass collecting drunk guys like to grab whatever, really. I'd elbow them pretty hard and they couldn't complain because I'd get them kicked out the bar with the bouncer. Bouncers never needed proof, thankfully. I'd just say the word and they'd drag a person out. Never abused this power, though, only the assholes who deserved it. There was a third bar for fancy events, and it was also used often for wedding reception. The doors would open up later in the evening, and the people from bar 3 would leak into bar 2. Lots of family drama. Police have been called often. One of our male bartenders once got high. He had to be taken to hospital. Our bar's cameras somehow weren't running that evening, and the bar had no idea why bar owner was there every weekend, would get wasted every weekend and drive home alone in that state. He was a massive asshole, and we'd all just avoid him if we could. The bar manager was probably the best boss I've ever had, though. A different male bar staff lost his coat and went down to closed bar 1 to look for it. We found him on the floor, passed out. He'd got himself so worked up, panicking over this coat, he'd lost consciousness. Ambulance was called. One drunken male hounded me all evening, refusing to be served by anyone else but me, and flirted with me. I was friendly and polite, but shut down any attempts. The drunker he got, the worse he got. Eventually, the bouncer kicked him out once he started threatening to smash my ducking head in if I didn't kiss him. Manager had a fiancé, but was seeing one of the bar staff. Fiancé also worked at the bar. That was fun. They got into a huge catfight and had to be put on permanent separate shifts, so they never saw each other again. Staff meetings became create cocktails, which we could add to the menu and to drink all the cocktails you've created. Happened maybe once a month. Loved staff meetings. The bar had 2 managers. One handled bars 1 and 2, while the second handled bar 3 and the wedding events. Manager 2 would make all his bar staff put tips into a group pot, which would be spent on one big event for all the staff once a year. Beer bus, usually. He got fired for stealing a ton of money from the bar and made off with all of their tips. It sucked. Regular came in every weekend and only drank Diet Pepsi. He'd just sit at the end of the bar, and he was all the staff's best friend. Everyone got to know him and loved him. He'd made a ton of friends and could talk to anyone. The bouncers were amazing people too. One of the ones I was close to was a college teacher during the week. After I left, I went and babysat his 2 kids on weekends while he worked. The people there really made that job amazing. I still miss them. Story 19. This story needs to be told. I was working at a local Last Comic Standing show at this comedy club. People submitted audio, video of their stand-up, and the radio station picked 10 people to do 5 minutes each to compete for $1,000. One of the contestants is a man who walked into the bar holding a monkey puppet. For real, I'm not setting up a joke. Wearing a leather vest with no shirt. He walks up and says, "Listen, bro, my house burned down 2 weeks ago. My dogs died and my girlfriend left me. I have no money. You got to hook up me with a free drink." The contestants get 1 free drink, so I hook him up, but he wants another. I ask him for a credit card to open a tab. He provides one and starts ordering shots for people around him. Eventually, it's his turn. His full act was him making the monkey lip syncs to "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie. He gets off stage and leaves the club. I kind of felt bad before remembering his tab was still open. I decide to run his card, and spoiler alert, it was declined. I send the bouncers outside to go look for him, and I guess he was just having a cigarette. I ask for another form of payment, and he admits he has no money. My manager didn't want to deal with police, so she had the bouncers ask him to leave. He apologized and left. 20 minutes later, I turn and see him at the end of the bar waving me over. This dude seriously came back and asked for another drink. At one point, he actually got on his knees with tears in his eyes. I kept asking him to leave, reminding him he already got $90 worth of free crap, and the cops, unfortunately, our bouncers aren't allowed to bounce, are called. They ask him to step outside. He turns to me and asks for another drink. This goes on for about 5 minutes before he attempts to kick the lamp 3 feet above his head to prove that he could whoop your ass, Karen. Mid-kick, they tase him right in the ass. Pop. I guess they hit a sweet spot because he pissed his pants also. Weeks later, he called the club looking for his monkey. Story 20. Years ago, I was a bartender for a local bar. A mostly awesome job where the money was decent and the beer flowed freely. Though every now and again, you would encounter some pretty douchey people. This is a tale of one of those people. I fondly recall this one time where I had this guy come in and sit at my bar during a slow spell in the day. The bar top was empty, so he had the whole thing to himself and my undivided attention. I remember him saying how he had shown up a bit earlier than his date for the night and how he wanted to knock back a few to help ease the nerves. A fairly common request. I remember his drink order. He wanted a premium margarita with top-shelf ingredients, blended with extra salt on the rim. I whipped up his drink. He complimented its deliciousness and proceeded to guzzle it fairly quickly over the course of around 20 minutes. He ordered another, standard procedure. I figured, what the hell? His date's on the way, nothing wrong with a bit of liquid courage. So I mix up his second drink and my back is turned while I'm watching the blender. As the noise dies down, I hear a familiar click click. I turn around to pour his drink into a mug in front of him and see this dude clipping his fingernails right onto the bar top. Not exactly the best place to take care of that, but whatever, man. Guess he wants to look good for his date. So halfway through his second drink, his date arrives, and this dude wants to close out his tab and get a table. My douchebag sensor starts tingling as I hand him the little tray thing with his card and receipt to sign. I make myself busy at the other end of the bar and bid him a good rest of his evening as he and his lady grab a table. I go to pick up the tray and receipt when, lo and behold, Ducker stiffed me and left a pile of his ducking fingernail clippings in the tray. Come on, man. You just spent $18 on 2 drinks, and the only tip I got was a handful of your disgusting, gangly nails? Duck that. I watched the bar ticker closely as the waitress from his section put in the order I recognized. Premium margarita, blended with extra salt. I did what any petty revenger would do. I tossed that pile of his own nail clippings into the blender along with his drink, then blended it up nicely. Then I watched menacingly from a distance as he chugged down his frosty beverage, knowing that was all the tip I needed. As an epilogue, he ended up not tipping the waitress, either on a fairly hefty tab, and I regret nothing. Story 21. Crap drunk people do. I once had a woman who crap at the bar. She was wearing a dress, scooted her ass off the side of the bar stool, crap, and continued like nothing happened. I suppose she didn't have on panties? Story 22. This happened to me when I worked in a rather country bar in Virginia. A snowstorm was about to hit and management was planning on closing shop, but asked for a couple people to stay on for a couple hours before heading out. I lived right down the road, so I volunteered and I'm glad I did. This one guy, who looked like he might have already had a few, ripped a $20 bill in half, gave me one half of it, and told me I'd get the other half if I rang the bell we had behind our bar. We rang it when we got awesome tips. He kept true to his promise and continued suit with more 20s, 50s, and eventually a $100 bill. I made over $400 in an hour and a half just by ringing a goddamn bell and got to enjoy a nice snowstorm at home. Easiest money I've ever made. Thank you, drunk guy. Story 23. I worked in a dive bar once that got a decent mix of underage drinkers, homeless people, and lunatics. One day, this guy orders our $3 draft. I pour it, set it down on a coaster in front of him. The guy, I kid you not, takes a straw from the holder and pulls that trick where you seal it with your finger. He pauses to throw me this suspicious glance, and then he takes the straw out and tastes it. The guy slowly pushes the coaster back across the bar with the tips of his fingers and says, "I'm not drinking this. You put arsenic in it." He was 100% serious. Another time, an older lady wanders into the bar, orders a glass of Cabernet. I pour her the wine, but a few minutes later, I see she's not touching it. I ask her if everything was okay, and she leans forward and tells me that she's peed her pants. Before I can react or do anything, she goes, "That's okay, I can fix it," and whips off her freaking pants in the middle of the bar. Story 24. I'm not sure if this counts or not, but I was a bouncer through most of college. On a slow night while I was checking IDs, a very drunk girl came and asked me how I'd gotten the job. Having gotten used to messing with drunks by this point, I told her that I'd defeated the last bouncer in the weekly fight, and that every Wednesday, since it's a slow night, they bring out a mat and a big drum, and I have to defend my status against any would-be bouncers who would like to challenge me. She said, "Nuh-uh," with a look of shock on her face, and after I reaffirmed my statement, she said she was going to ask the bartender to see if I was full of crap. This would have been a good move, but instead of doing the smart thing and saying, "How did the bouncer get his job?" she went up to the bartender and said, "Is it true that the bouncer has to fight someone every week to keep his job?" To which the veteran bartender just deadpanned and said, "Absolutely." Odds are she sobered up and put some scrutiny on our conversation, but I really hope there's a cute blonde girl out there somewhere that semi-believes there's a Bloodspot Kumite-style trial by combat happening once a week at Grammatics in Boulder, CO. Story 25. Had a Bucks party in one day, got fairly drunk, and had arranged the high bars, which were marble, through the middle of the bar. My first impression was that everything was okay, and they just wanted to all sit together. But alas, I was wrong. They had been sneakily pouring small amounts of beer on the tables the whole time, and around the time they were due to go. Two of them went into the toilets, sprinted from the toilet arse naked, and slid the length of the marble tables where they were caught by their mates. All in all, it was ducking. Hilarious. And as I was walking out to them with a huge smile on my face, to kick them out, obviously, my boss's conservative wife had just happened to walk in. Still amazed I kept my job that day. Story 26. We were about to close when we noticed a girl drunk sleeping in the pool room. We help her get up and take her to the couch so she can regain consciousness. Suddenly, she gets up, walks over to the couch in front of her while taking down her pants, sits on the couch as she's taking down her panties, and proceeds to fart and pee on the couch. The entire bar staff screams no as we watch it happening. Girl's so drunk she doesn't even notice, and of course falls back asleep on the floor with her butt in the air and still peeing, farting away. Me and the cook, both girls, start crying. We get the new guy to clean up. He didn't come back the next day. Story 27. I once had an arbitrator come in when I bartender at a good restaurant. He helped arbitrate the NHL lockout a couple years back. I almost didn't believe him, but then a couple suitors came in, majorly huge hockey family, and spoke with him. This is in a small city in Alberta, so it was quite a surprise. He ended up tipping me like $40 for an $80 tab. Story 28. Ran an open bar at a wedding for a client. Client had opted to pay a corkage fee and supply their own booze. Only request was that we keep the empty bottles of spirits for stock purposes, making sure we didn't pinch anything. Fair enough. At the end of the night, client begins going off on one as we are 2 Jack Daniel bottles short. I look around the ballroom and to my delight spot the bottles. With a big grin, I get to point out to the groom that his father and new father-in-law are appearing to have a grand old time downing a bottle of Jack each. The groom sheepishly apologized and dropped the matter, though I still had to tell the bar staff off for handing out the bottles in the first place. Story 29. A girl came up to me and asked for another drink. I refused her service because she was too drunk. The guy standing at the bar told her I would serve her if she showed me her tits. So, a split second later, she was standing there with her tits out. He then proceeded to just start sucking on them, ducking weird. I still didn't serve her, and then she threatened to report me to my manager that I harassed her. I don't miss being a bartender. Story 30. Late one night, I stumbled one of my regulars giving a guy BJ on our swing set. He was also a guy, so it took my by surprise. He still comes in every week though. Story 31. I used to bar manage a club which has a major investor that is Serbian. There were many Serbian parties, and they are like Dothraki wedding. I've seen multiple street brawls, and not one has ended without someone in hospital. I was bar managing another place, but for all intents and purposes, I was the AGM as well. I was always the main bartender and night manager, so I was always behind the bar and was the only man front of house, no bouncer. So about halfway through a shift, a crap guy walks up and tries to get a table. He was turned away and I was informed of it. Cool, no problem. Fast forward to about 10, I'm out back having a smoke. A server comes and gets me and tells me the guy's back and won't leave and is sitting at the bar. So I head back to the bar and see the guy. Now it's important to note that the bar in question is in a good area, but it's known for its alternative people. There are some rougher patrons that are good and loyal, but are hard to get to know. The guy whose place I took was loved and had been there for years, so everyone was still warming up to me. I'm a clean-cut guy, no tats, short hair, pretty much the opposite of many of the guests. So I get to the bar and see the guy. He's sitting there, swaying. I walk up and say, "Sorry, buddy, can't serve you," but he insists. So I walk around the bar, I tap him on the shoulder and say, "You were turned away before. I'm not gonna serve you, you've gotta leave," but he insists. So I grab his shoulder to turn him around and he just latches onto the bar. At this point, with a full bar in the middle of dinner service, I see all the regulars just watching me to see how I will handle it. Remember, I have no bouncer and 8 girls that can't help. So I made a decision. I stand behind him and quickly put him into a full Nelson and wrestle him out of the bar. As I get him across the threshold of the front door, he breaks free, turns, and throws a punch. I put an elbow up and block it and push him back. At this point, 5 regulars blast by me and grab this guy. In the front of the restaurant is a 7-foot by 10-foot window, which is a single piece of glass. Behind the window are 3 tables. As he is being pulled past the front of the building, he lashes out and punches the window and shatters the whole thing, showering all the customers in glass. At this point, I've been informed that the cops are on the way and none of the customers are hurt. I'm just rushing around doing damage control, cleaning glass, apologizing, trying to get the atmosphere back. Out of the corner of my eye, I look across the street and see my customers absolutely tuning this guy up, just absolutely stomping him. About a minute before the cops come, they bring him back over and sit him down. The cops come, everyone corroborates my story. They ask what happened to him, and I say I was occupied. The customers say he fell, and say no more. I got a few pats on the back, and from that night on, all the regulars warmed up to me and made me feel welcome. Of course, I would rather things had turned out differently, but the guy had a history of assault and public disorder and broke parole, so I don't feel that badly about it. All this happened the night before a huge street festival, which is the busiest day of the year, which also coincided with the World Cup. Story 32. I was standing at a urinal at a bar, peeing, like you do. A guy came in, pissed drunk, walked over to the urinal next to me and began peeing, without unzipping his pants. He stood there, pissed his pants, then went and washed his hands and went back out into the bar. Story 33. I used to work at a really nice restaurant in a wealthy city. I just turned 21 and had gotten my bartender's license. There was at least 2 times where a couple's asked me to come home with them, and I politely declined, although I was very flattered and took it as a compliment. Story 34. Working in a bar, we have tons of stories. The one that comes to mind the quickest is, toilet is for customers only. A lady came into the bar just to use the toilet. The bouncer kicked her out. She sat on the patio chairs in front of the bar and pissed herself. We ended up throwing the cushions away. Story 35. This is about a bar owner and a drunk patron. I had just started at a local and really good Irish pub. I had drank there for a number of years before getting a job doing barback, busboy, and security stuff. We rarely hit capacity, though it wasn't a huge place, so I was there more to deal with problem people so that the bartenders didn't have to, rather than being a door bouncer. I basically did anything bar or waitstaff needed me to. It was a good job, nice pub, patrons were usually older, and not too rowdy. Anyway, within the first few weeks of working there, nothing had really happened. One night after close, the owner, who would often go out to hockey games and come back already drunk to open the taps of the staff, job perk, came back to help close up. He told me to just go around and check for trash and puke and stuff. All was well until I came to the last corner bench table. Some phlegm wad had upchucked under the table against the wall. The tables are long and bolted to the floor with benches on either side bolted to the floor and wall, so you can't move anything. This was a big pile of puke, too. I start getting a mop and paper towel and gloves and stuff, and the owner pushes past me and says, duck that, it'll take too long. You get a thick skin being in the bar business long enough. And he gets on his hands and knees under the front of the table, reaches back and pulls all of the barf out from the table and scoops it into a plastic bag with his bare hands. It was impressive, and one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. Story 36. My favorite story is when it rained. It had been unseasonably warm, like 30 degrees Celsius. We're British, not used to the heat. For a good 2 weeks, and one day the heavens opened out of nowhere. Never seen rain come down like it. I pointed it out to one of the regulars. At this point, he screamed, ripped his shirt off, and ran outside in just his shorts and started dancing. About 2 minutes later, the rain stops as suddenly as it started. He walks back in, puts his shirt back on, and continues drinking his pint as if nothing had ever happened. He was an otherwise normal bloke. Saw him every week for all the time I worked there. I guess the heat made him crazy. At some point that week, one of my colleagues poured the cold water that was left in the ice bucket over his own head mid-shift. I was jealous. Story 37. Back in the day, I was a bartender at a popular bar just off the campus of a large university. Most of our patrons were college or grad students or professors, a few blue-collar regulars. Overall, a fun place to work, and I really liked the patrons. But the creepy, random drunk guys, girl, not fun. As a pretty young female bartender, you realistically know you'll have guys hitting on you. I took it in stride and could easily sidestep the "do you have a boyfriend" questions without upsetting or leading the guys on. But this one guy that came in, I'd never seen him before. Average-looking dude, maybe early 30s, came in sober and the bar wasn't busy yet. We chatted about various things. Sports, Jeopardy, was on the TV at the time because early evening, school, etc. Didn't get a creepy vibe from it. Several hours later, however, he was getting pissed that I had to serve lots of other patrons. Obviously gets busier the later it gets on a Friday. So then while I had a short downtime and I was standing behind the bar washing glasses, he asked me the question, did I have a boyfriend? I thought for a few seconds on how to answer the best way with this particular guy. I told him that no, I didn't have a boyfriend. I had 2 boyfriends. Very matter of fact. He laughed and really seemed to like this answer. He was like, nice. Usually my tactic was to be one of the guys with regular male patrons. However, an hour later, this same guy very belligerently demanded my phone number. Obviously, nope. He started yelling slurs at me, and the bouncer gave me the "do you need me" look. I waved him off at the time, thinking I could easily handle this guy. I was very, very wrong. Within the next 30 seconds, I hadn't even cut him off yet. He quickly jumped on top of and over the bar in order to put his hands around my neck. Another patron yelled for the bouncer at the same time he himself jumped over to tackle the creeper. The entire bar just erupted, wanting to beat the crap out of this guy. The bouncer got him out safely and called the cops. Yes, it put a damper on my night. Story 38. So I'm not a bartender, but I do have a fair amount of kitchen experience and a story about the bartender I used to work at. So I feel like I can share. One night I'm just chilling in dish pit, plowing away on dishes. Bartender walks towards the back door with a small plastic bucket and a pair of chopsticks. Whole kitchen crew looks at him and goes, "What happened?" Turns out somebody crapped themselves, decided that the best thing to do in the scenario was to try and flush their boxers down the toilet. Yes, there's obviously garbage cans in the bathroom. Yes, they're definitely big enough that they can handle a pair of underwear. Bartender had to go and pull the boxers out of the toilet using a pair of chopsticks. Really crap night. Story 39. I was working this country wedding a few years ago. And by country, I mean country. Out on their land, giant tents, country band, guns, and lots of jack. Anyway, the people there were nice as the day is long, and overall it was a lot of fun. But groom's brother was a proper country boy, about 6'5" and twice the width and the shoulders of a normal man. During the wedding, he was so happy for his brother and basically carried this giant bottle of jack with him and drank craps for the newlyweds with everyone he stopped by. At some point, he comes up to his brother. The groom grabs him by the shoulders and loudly proclaims, "Down the hatch!" At which the groom tried protesting, telling him that it's not fitting for him to get drunk. Oh, not so fast. The giant simply holds his brother tighter, essentially sticks a bottle down groom's throat, and shakes both groom and the bottle, effectively pouring lay triple down guy's throat. They laugh it off and the night goes on. At the end of the night, as we're packing, the giant comes up to us, hands us a $20 tip each, and tells us what a wonderful job we've done. Then he looks at me, at the bottle, and asks that I drink for the newlywed. I tell him that I can't, I am the manager, and that it isn't fitting for me to drink on the job. He then gently grabs me by the shoulder and says, "Down the hatchet." And that's how I got drunk at the job, because I was scared a man 1.5 my size would shake the booze into me, regardless whether I wanted to or not. Story 40. I work at a fine dining restaurant. One night, this lady in her mid-40s comes in, says she's waiting for 2 more. She orders a drink and her friend, slightly younger woman, shows up. Then the fun begins. They start getting raunchy with the male bartender and tell him the full story behind that night. They posted a Craigslist ad looking for someone to watch them have sex in a nearby hotel room. The guy arrives, buys a $200 bottle of wine, and they leave. Worst part of the story, no one was above a 4. Story 41. No a barman, but a bouncer. Caught a guy pleasure himself into a stolen purse. Awkward return of item ensued. I was threatened often, of course, but one guy threatened to ask his grandpa, a war veteran, to blow my up of something. One asshole threw up in the champagne room between the bench and the wall, where there was a small crack. Champagne room smelled like vomit for a whole month. I could figure out how the guys still managed to get horny with the smell. Story 42. I worked at this dive, and management wouldn't let us kick anyone out. Had this guy come in during the Bread and Honey Festival, basically an excuse for everyone in this damn town to drink for 3 days straight. One of my regulars come in, and he's usually a pretty nice guy, a little rough around the edges, but funny, and we got along even when he was hammered, so it was cool. The girl I was working with did not get along with him at all. He would call her an ugly fat Karen, and she would call him inbred white trash. Anyways, it's really busy, and he's drunk and wanted another beer, but we've got 15 people asking for drinks, plus all the servers' drinks to make, and we're slammed. So he's yelling at us, "Give me another beer, duck you, I want another," and so on. And we're getting pissed. So the other girl I'm working with turns to him and says, "Get the duck out, you're drunk, and I can't deal with your ass right now." He gets super pissed and starts throwing dirty glasses off the tables at us. So now, on top of all the drinks, we have broken glass to deal with. The rest of our regulars decide that this has gone too far. They collectively pick the asshole up and take him out the back door. We didn't see him for 2 weeks, and when we did, he was a few different shades. Story 43. My uncle has been running the same bar for the past 30 years. It's a local spot off the beaten path, and every once in a while, some interesting things happen. One of my favorites was a few Christmas Eves ago, my uncle and a few other of the bar patrons had to separate these 2 idiots while they were fist fighting over what was on TV. One person wanted to watch sports, and the other wanted to watch something else. While they were being pulled apart, they were still lunging for one another, and one of the guys managed to lunge far enough forward to literally bite the tip off the other guy's nose. They picked it up, put it on ice, and someone drove him to the ER. The other guy was never seen again, but the legend of the Lake Hopatcong nosebiter lives on. Story 44. I have many crazy stories, but one that sticks out is the time some guy came in absolutely wasted. Somehow, managed to get a beer from one of our servers. After he finished, he came up and was being an idiot to me, talking bad about my city. He apparently lived in SF. I was going to tell him to duck off and leave, but before I have the chance, he asked me how our NA beer is. However, he's an idiot. Doesn't realize NA means non-alcoholic, and he is pronouncing it NAW. He's asking because it's the cheapest beer on the menu, so I take full advantage of the situation and he drinks like 5 over the next couple of hours. He sobers up some, and I don't have to deal with kicking him out. Sweet justice. Story 45. I once had a very drunk guy sit next to me at a bar and try to tell me a story about a time that he saw one of the bartenders throw a violent drunk out. Problem was that he was so drunk that his story made him sound like a violent drunk. The bartenders were concerned, and they kept checking with me. I think they kicked him out after I left. Story 46. My friend used to work as a bartender and had some regular 50-plus customers. Once of them showed up with a friend, they got more or less drunk, and he made his friend sing opera. The guy actually used to be a professional singer. So that was pretty random, but cool. Story 47. When I worked as a bouncer, had several people that would get angry to the point of refusing to leave because they couldn't get a cab. They swore we had some kind of red phone that gave us priority at the cab company, that we were refusing them. Story 48. I watched a guy get literally thrown out of the bar, sideways. Thrower was an ex-NFL lineman, only out of the league for a few months at the time. About 6'7", 300-plus pounds, all muscle. Thrower was a migrant worker. They tend to cause problems in our area when around rural area. When they show up, stuff gets stolen out of unlocked vehicles, get in fights, that kind of stuff. Thrower threatened to hurt someone there. Thrower promptly picked him up, turned him sideways, and threw him out the door. Thrower folded up like a chair when he hit the door frame. Thrower told him to stay the duck out, never saw another migrant in that bar. Since story 49. I used to bartend at a little restaurant in Little 5 Points in Atlanta, Georgia around the period of a year or so that Andy was in town filming something. It turns out Andy was best friends with one of our waitresses, so I have millions of Andy stories. He's, unfortunately, a real mess when he's ducked up, and people tend to humor him. I've had to stop the guy from setting up lines of substances on the bar top, throwing metal spoons at a pair of bouncers, lying on the floor, having a crying fit, etc. You get a completely different Andy, depending on what he's on. Bartenders of Reddit, what is the most outrageous thing you've seen during your shift? Story 1. For context, I'm missing the majority of my fingers due to a congenital defect, and it was my first month working as a bartender when I had this convo with a very drunk lady, me at the bar, pouring drinks. Lady, hey, I have a question I can't stop thinking about. Me, sure, go ahead. Lady, are you a lesbian? Me, nope. Lady, thank because you don't have fingers. I've never laughed so hard in my life, and my coworker was in tears too. It's been nearly 5 years and I still think about this. Best part was this was only at about 1 p.m. Got to love bottomless brunch. Story 2. I was managing an upscale Italian restaurant in a fancy SF neighborhood during COVID. I walk outside to our patio and notice a patron reaching over the divide, trying to hand something to the couple sitting in the next booth. I speed walk over and notice that this man's pants are down at his knees, and the man in the next booth is yelling that he's trying to hand them substances. So I find myself telling this pantsless man, let's put on our pants and keep our substances to ourselves, which was a sentence I never thought I'd be uttering. COVID was truly wild time. Story 3. Only did the gig for 6 months at a local pub, but this still sticks out in my mind well over a decade later. Then 2 different bachelorette parties came in around the same time to pregame a bit before heading to the clubs, and both brides to be traded snotty comments. I got them to separate by giving one group complimentary access to the normally paid-for pool table in one corner, and set up the other group with a dartboard in the pub's opposite corner. Plenty of separation between the two with something to distract them. Job done, right? Right? Nope. I'd convinced both groups to grab pitchers of mixed drinks to share and steered them towards light ABV drinks so they wouldn't get too drunk and rowdy before they left for the clubs and stop being my problem, because I have basic brains and can recognize problems in the making. My fellow bartender Melissa saw 2 groups of women with plenty of cash to spend and tip with, and served both with several rounds of mixed shooters, which were mostly either at 40% ABV or above 30% at the tamest. I was not made aware of this until we dealt with the aftermath. I was deep frying a pound of hot wings in the galley kitchen for one of my regulars when I heard World War III start and ran out of the kitchen. My distraction had failed, and both groups had decided that the perfect thing to make the night better was to scream at each other about stupid high school drama even of the youngest of them should have outgrown. Bridal Party A had the close range advantage with their pool cues, while Bridal Party B had the ranged advantage with their darts, even if they had limited ammunition. The entire seating area quickly turned into a chaotic battlefield of hair pulling and clothes tearing in some places, while one of the more pragmatic individuals from Group A used her pool cue like a spear to jab someone in Group B in the stomach, hard enough she puked up maybe $30 worth of shots. Meanwhile, the MVP on Group B's side was actually hanging back with a fistful of darts and was actively chucking them into the fight whenever she saw an opportunity. Mostly she missed, and her few hits were as equally likely to hit friend versus foe. But hey, she gave it her best shot and played things smart enough that later, When everything was put to a stop, she was the only one without visible bruises, cuts, clothing damage, or even a drink splashed in her face or on her clothes. The fiercest part of the battle was the two generals themselves, both brides grappling and fighting like their lives were on the line, instead of it just being a stupid bar fight between two groups of friends who had some stupid rivalry years ago about stupid teenage bullcrap. At one point, they were both choking each other like they were in a silent agreement that the first one to tap out or pass out was the loser. And that part of their duel only got interrupted when Bride A tripped over a woman on the ground from Group B, and they both lost their grip on the other when they crashed to the ground. Melissa and I crouched behind the bar like it was a foxhole, and were quickly joined by Steve as his wings burned in the deep fryer, and he grips his pint of Budweiser like a lifeline. Melissa had already called 911, so we just stayed hunkered while I wondered how much of a pain in the ass it was going to be to clean up the carnage once the fierce battle was stopped. When the cops came through the door, both sides pretty much froze in place within a second or two. I'll keep the conclusion short because it was all fairly quiet and mundane. Both parties got a trip to the cop shop. I don't know what they got charged with, but I do know they all got at least 2 or 3. I gave the cops a copy of the security footage, but the equipment was crappy and low-res enough that even watching it back a couple times, there was no way to say which side started things. After we gave our statements and the cops left, I locked the door but told Steve to grab a seat. I made him a fresh batch of wings and poured him a pint and comped his entire bill on top. Dude already had the wide-eyed look of a man who'd found God in the face of violence no normal man should face, so I let him eat his wings while me and Melissa did our best to clean up the debris from Bride War 2. I had the carpet cleaner out to clean up the puke from the pool cue victim, and was wondering out loud how she snuck that many shots in her tiny purse when Melissa admitted she'd brought both parties a few rounds of shooters. So Melissa cleaned up the puke while I closed up the kitchen, bar, and till so we could lock up and leave and pretend the entire day was all a bad fever dream. I unlocked the front door and Steve walked away with a belly full of wings and a 1,000-yard stare, and Melissa and I just went our own way home. It was probably the biggest brawl we'd seen, but it was honestly only novel because of the sheer scale of it and the gender of the participants. Most shifts from Thursday to Saturday night, it wasn't surprising to see a quick brawl between a few guys with too much testosterone and Jaeger bombs than common sense, but they were usually so quick and contained that most regulars barely glanced at it, and both Melissa and I could clean up the mess and reopen the table or booth in under 15 minutes with barely a blip in service time. Story 4. It's been a few years since I bartended, but we had to kick a guy out once, and he came back like half an hour later and punched through the wire-reinforced glass in the front door. Tore his hand and wrist to crap. He wound up waiting on the curb for both police and ambulance to arrive. 24-hour emergency glass repair company had the window replaced by the time we closed. Story 5. My mom was a bartender. She's told me a few of stories from it. 1. She went to break up a fight between 2 biker groups and she ended up getting flipped, and her leg got caught in a ceiling fan. Broke her leg but stopped the fight. 2. She got her own drink laced with substances one night while working by someone she knew. 3. Before Queen got super famous, they played a show at her bar, and afterwards came up and asked her if they could throw an after party, and it was just Queen, like 50 people, and her and another bartender. Someone from Queen may have ducked my mother and I isn't even mad. She said they were super nice guys that just wanted to have a fun time, not a crazy party. Story 6. Not working in a bar, but a friend and I were camping in France. We were exploring the local area and walked into a bar and ordered a Coke each, seeing as it was midday. The bartender seemed a little off. There were another 2 bartenders there that were standing at the end of the bar, plus what looked like a couple of waitresses. We thought it odd seeing as it was a tiny pub and had only use for a single bartender. Our drinks were poured in the wrong type of glass. No ice was added and they were laboriously filled to the brim. The 2 waitresses were wiping down already clean tables. In fact, one table was clumsily wiped down 3 times as we stood there. The 2 other bartenders had started wiping the inside of glasses with the wrong type of cloth. These people did not belong in a bar. They had 0 experience whatsoever. The barman handed us our drinks and we went to pay, but after messing around with the till and not getting it to work, we were told that there was a problem and that the drinks were free. That was the only spoken words from any of the staff at that time. We took our drinks into the garden and talked about the strange vibe in the pub. No other customers, yet 5 staff for a small pub with around 15 tables. After a while, I went back inside to ask about nearby hotels, but there was nobody there. I called out but heard nothing in reply, so I went to use the bathroom. When I opened the door, I saw a large pile of clothes on the floor. Next to it and leaning against the wall was a military-looking assault weapon. I spun around to leave quickly and walked briskly out of the pub. As I exited to go into the garden, I was stopped by 2 of the barmen who insisted I sat down inside for free drinks. I also saw that my friend was being led inside. At this point, I was really unsure as to what to do, so I sat down. My friend sat beside me, and the other bar staff appeared and started jabbering in what sounded like a Slavic language. Eventually, they all exited into another room, and we were told to wait. We didn't. We left and ran up the road and hid in some bushes. A few minutes later, two cars drove slowly by, one driven by one of the bartenders, the other by someone else. They were clearly looking for someone. We think it was us. When they had driven past, we ran across some fields and took a bus back to our campsite. Once there, we saw one of the cars and the bartender arrive at the reception. He appeared to show a badge and began asking questions to the receptionist. We never took our tent or our sleeping bags, just our backpacks, and went cross-country until we found a train station, where we boarded a train to Nice. That was back in 1981. My friend died several years ago, but we talked at length about what had happened, but could never really explain it. Story 7. Bouncer here. Not bartender, but I worked at the Hard Rock Hotel in San Diego. We had 2 clubs and a pretty extensive security team, including a weekends-only team for the bars. We had a holding cell and a few of us were EMTs. We also had a wheelchair covered in a trash bag. Why do we have a wheelchair covered with a trash bag? Well, for the shookers, of course. You see, when young ladies enter the mating ritual, they will usually go to the club in their finest skin-tight dress and high heels, skipping meals that day to look better. Then they'll have alcohol poured down their gullet all night by the men participating in this ritual. Inevitably, one or more ladies will find themselves intoxicated to the point they need to go to the restroom to throw up and pass out. And a special few will also crap themselves whilst doing so. Crap plus puke equals shookers. Not singling out ladies here, but the ratio was almost 100 to 1 of women to men shookers. My guess is less body mass, largely the reason we kept lady security officers on staff so they could go in and bring the shookers to our office before carting them away in an ambulance. Story 8. Early 2000s cattlemen's convention at a resort. 6 feet 6 inches easily. 300-pound cowboy drinking for several hours. Knocked over a table and a waitress. Staggered up to the bar, wanting more pitchers of beer. Cut him off, attempted to give him anything else. Soda, juice, coffee. Cowboy becomes irate, his buddies egging him on. Explained to him that I could lose my liquor license and the bars as well. Grabs me by the throat and pulls me over the bar, yelling, "I don't need some punk telling me how much I can or can't drink." While doing his best, Homer Simpson choke out on Bart. Security steps in and it takes 6 of them to take him down. Manager comes by to ask what happened. I told him and he yells at me because they're here for a convention. If they don't spend money here, they'll just go somewhere else. I was ready to quit. I had a mark of his handprint around my throat for 3 days. Never saw them again. I also saw an older, hard-up bartender almost go off with an obvious drag queen after our shift. Story 9. I don't necessarily think it was outrageous, but one time I waited on a couple and the man was a little person and the woman was average height. I asked what they wanted to drink and the man said something like, "Crown and Coke, tall," and the woman said a short cranberry vodka. I guess it was the first time they had gone out because they just looked at each other and burst out laughing over their obvious size preference. And it made me chuckle too. Story 10. Not while bartending, but working at an ice cream shop. This office girl used to buy 2 empanadas from the supermarket next to us and a big ice cream from us. She ate everything in one sitting, as if it was her last meal on earth. She did not lick the ice cream like many of us do. She took bites. Then, 2 minutes later, would lock herself in the bathroom and vomit it all. When she got out, the whole store smelled like death. I know she's a bulimic and this is not her fault, but I had to call her out, tell her that I would appreciate it if she stopped, because I was the one who needed to clean this every day. She did. I hope she is better nowadays. Story 11, we had the guy who was a puker. One night at last call, he pounded a beer so he could get one more. But immediately after pounding it, he puked it back up into the pint glass. Being wasted, he wanted another one and repounded his puke beer. Puker was a friend of friend. He and my friend were in the same frat, and he told me a story of his legendary puking. One night, while playing Edward 40 Hands, he finished one of his beers and had to puke. Instead of puking on the floor, he put the empty bottle up to his mouth and puked back into it. He swore that he didn't spill a drop. Story 12. Bar trivia host here. Can I play too? Had a guy, about 6 feet 3 inches, blonde military flat top, charge my table because the category for the final round was acronym, and the correct answer to the question was technically an initialism. He was banging on my table with his fists, losing his mind, but one of the bartenders noticed he had a 9mm on his hip. This is where it's important to point out this was a libertarian brewery in New Hampshire. Every bartender, waitress, and busboy in the place, including the owner, was also strapped and drew on this guy, encouraging him to leave. So anyway, it's only an acronym if you pronounce it like a word, NASA, and it's an initialism if you just say the letters, FBI. Story 13. I worked as a doorman at a bar at university while attending there. Our football team was hosting an arch rival one weekend, and a few of the opponent players were in the bar wearing team jerseys. One of the waitresses came up to me and said, "That big guy in the XXX jersey, is eating glasses. I figured I must have misheard, but she repeated, he's eating beer glasses. I went over to the table and sure enough, this guy was breaking off chunks of glass from the rim, apparently chewing them and swallowing them. To this day, I don't know if it was some kind of magic trick, but it sure looked real to me. The guy was huge, probably 4 inches taller than me and twice my weight. I told him politely, you have to stop damaging our property, or I'll have to ask you to leave. If you don't, I'll have to call campus security, and they will report this to your coach. I was very relieved when he agreed to behave with no further escalation, as I would have had my butt kicked. I really wish I knew how he did that, though. Story 14. Courtney Love and Winona Ryder came in out of their ducking mine. I'm guessing alcohol and pills. Love kept trying to hold my hand and ask if I knew who she was. It was sad and gross. Story 15. I had a guy in a wheelchair wheel up behind me when I was sitting at a bar, and he began punching me weakly in the back/side of my abdomen, as if he was trying to start a fight with a stranger. I literally turned around and laughed out of shock, and the bartender saw it and wheeled the guy out of the bar and locked him out. Looking back on it, it's kind of sad because he was definitely either drunk or depressed and wanting someone to whoop his ass real good. Glad it was me and not someone with no self-control he decided to attack. Story 16. I'm not a bartender, but the bar I frequent recently showed me video of a customer who apparently whipped out his sex toy and showed it to another patron. Said patron then started throwing punches. My bartender tackled the guy. Guy went home with the popos. Since there was no audio to the security footage, I imagine things went something like, bro, check this out. Whips out sex toy, other bro. TF. Why you show me your sex toy? Throws punches. Story 17. Fight started between 2 drunks outside my bar. Smaller guy runs back into the joint while I'm collecting empties, shouting that he's got a gun. And dummy me stands in front of a glass door to lock it and stands there while the dude runs up to the door with gun in hand and I'm looking straight at him. Girl at the bar I was flirting with shouts at me, what the hell are you doing? And I thought, wait, what? And jumped out of the way. Story 18. Had a guy stalk me after bar, closing a ski mask. One lady smashing a beer bottle over another lady's face. One dude smeared crap all over the toilet on my birthday while bartending. Story 19. I worked at a club/pub in London back in like 2004. This pub was famous for being the birthplace of drum and bass music, although that was very much disputed. Every Friday or Saturday night, there would be a team of about 10 bouncers, and they were absolutely needed. One night, about 20 coked-up lads were denied entry, and a mass brawl ensued between them and the bouncers. I was working behind the bar. After the brawl was over, the bouncers maintained their unbeaten record, of course. One of the bouncers casually sauntered over to the bar, slowly sat down and calmly said in a thick Jamaican accent, "Give me a brandy, I've just been stabbed." We called an ambulance, and he waited for the ambulance, just sipping his brandy like we were all making a fuss over nothing. It was only when the paramedics came in he deigned to open the front of his jacket to reveal a 6-inch knife stuck 5.5 inches deep into his chest. The paramedics, who had seemed quite calm until now, sprung into frantic action. I remember the bouncer being stretchered out, still with a completely bemused and calm expression. Story 20. I've been out of the business for many, many years, but back in my day, the wildest thing I ever saw was 2 girls do stuff in the middle of the dance floor. This was in a busy nightclub on a Friday night. I've seen a lot of crap, but that was the most outrageous that I can recall. Story 21. Bachelor party. One of the entertainers has a disturbing and impressive party trick involving ping pong balls. Stop booking bachelor parties after that one. Story 22. Seen a girl who was on her time of the month literally stand up, take off her pad, sat down, and bleed into the chair and trail it through the floor. We had to close a 24-hour bar for 2 days for hazmat cleaning. I work in a Vegas casino, Story 23, dive bar in Brighton. I managed. Group of lads were ordering a shot of Leah and Perrins or Tabasco with every round. They were making their skint mate do the shot before he could have a pint. Nothing too crazy. I turfed them out when they produced a pint of piss and placed it on the table for their mate to drink. Far from the worst thing I witnessed, but a healthy barometer to judge friends by. Story 24. We had a guy that at one point had too many ciders give that look to us of, I'm about to crap my pants, jumped off the stool and run to the toilets few minutes later. Clearly a bit sheepish, walks out of the toilets and a sharp exit towards the door. Staff have to check the toilets regularly to keep up. With hygiene, so in I go. Smells like a cat died in there. Eyes starting to water. I go towards the cubicle. Crap everywhere. Think Exorcist, but through someone's arse. Walls, seat, and floor covered. I look around and see some on the windowsill. What the heck? Get help to clean it up, but curiosity of the window gets the better of me. I go outside and there I see it. Crap sogging boxers slowly moving, with a crafty snail trail down the wall. Guy literally crap himself and covered the place before he ran away. Story 25. I worked at a German brewery near a college, not a bartender, but a busser. Naturally, I had to clean puke a lot, and I have a few stories. One guy tried running outside. He was holding his mouth tight and sprinting, but it really just sprinklered all over the front entrance hallway. Floor, walls, ceiling. The kicker was, it was spaghetti. German place doesn't even serve spaghetti. At night, the place was pretty dark and seating was not assigned after a certain time. A coworker told me there was puke on a table, so I went to the table that was covered. There was a new group of people sitting there, drinking, and they looked at me oddly with all my cleaning supplies. They then looked down at the table in horror and started screaming when they saw it was covered in puke. This restaurant also had an outside bar that was at a lower level. I was cleaning glasses and it was a sunny day, but there was an awning above the bar. I suddenly heard what sounded like heavy rain, followed by people screaming. Someone on the upper level puked on the awning, and it was dripping down on customers below. That was an interesting one to clean. Bonus story. I was using the restroom, and I saw a guy sprint in and puke all over the floor. In comes his dad, and he's berating him heavily. "I haven't thrown up in a bar since '87, you wimp. No son of mine is going to yak after a couple drinks." Anyway, the guy tipped me $20 to clean his son's puke all while berating him while he's near a comatose. Story 26. I used to chill at a local Kelsey's, where some friends worked at the bar. There was this obnoxious guy in an electric scooter who would get crap-faced drunk all the time, and randomly stuff would go missing. Well, one day, he reached over the counter and tried stealing like 4 bar glasses, literally, right? In front of me and the bartender. He then tried to gaslight, even though they were literally in his cart basket and jacket pocket. A few weeks later, when I was working, he had come into our store, stood up from his scooter, then sat on an item and continued to go around the store, playing it off like he didn't take anything. After reviewing footage, it was very much clear he was a klepto. Story 27. Worked at an outdoor bar at the beach. Local crowd, live music most nights, dance floor. It was a fun spot. One night, a woman in, if I had to guess, her mid-30s was out with coworkers and had been pounding tequila shots. A song comes on and she goes, "Oh, I love this song," and got up to dance. While dancing, she had the liquid courage to attempt a backflip for some reason. Landed on her head and started screaming/writhing in agony. Had to call an ambulance, and as far as I know, she ended up fine. Part 1 remember most was one of her friends consoling her on the ground and going, "You're okay. You always crush the backflip. You must have slipped." Story 28. Fairly infamous guy on the strip. Confessed to me that he had shoved substances in. He was tweaking out like crazy. Got banned by everyone 2 years later. No idea how he stayed alive all this time. Story 29. My mom was a bartender back in the 80s, around the time when Jägermeister started marketing towards the younger college-age demographics. One night, the bar is running specials and the Jaeger is flowing and everyone is having a blast. Eventually, 4 a.m. rolls around. My mom calls last call and clears out the stragglers. As she's cleaning, she notices one gentleman is still in the bar. This man is fast asleep, passed out, snoring, but standing upright, she eventually gets old drunk up and out of the bar. And now I'm kind of foggy on the details of what happened afterwards, but a year later, they were married, and another year after that, I made my grand entrance into this world. Story 30. Cook, not bartender, but I was off the clock and my girlfriend was bartending. 2 a.m. rolled around, and I was nestled into my bar stool when a female customer said she would literally finished if she got cheese curds. I hopped out of my bar stool and dropped the curds. One of her friends didn't like that and followed me into the kitchen to fight me. We squabbled and he ended up with a busted lip and a severe fryer oil burn. I think he got off easy, all things considered. Remember, nothing good happens at 2 a.m. Story 31. I got jumped by a street gang in a bar back in the 1990s, which turned into a brawl between approximately 25 people intermittently over the course of about 2 hours. By the end of the night, most of the staff had left and quit. The incident was so poorly handled that the city shut down the bar. Story 32. Also, I'm not a bartender, but I lived in an apartment building near a downtown area with a lot of bars and clubs. One night around 4:30 a.m., I'm in bed in my little studio apartment, and I hear footsteps crunching in the pebbles outside my window. It wasn't unusual because a lot of shift workers lived there, and my place was next to the laundry room, so people would come and go at odd hours all the time. Except, instead of the footsteps moving towards the laundry room, they went around the corner of the building. The next thing I know, the handle on my back door is rattling back and forth and someone is trying to pull it open. I'm delirious with fear at this point, and I could barely keep my hands steady while I called 911 from my cell. It stopped before the cops showed up. Felt like it took an hour for them to get there. And an officer took down what little information I had and said that they couldn't find anyone on the property, but they were checking around the neighborhood. Monday afternoon, I'm just getting home from work, and I ran into a neighbor at the mailbox, and I brought up what had happened the previous morning. It had happened at her place as well, except she saw the person before calling 911. She was a bartender, and the guy going around our building trying doors was a drunk customer. who had followed her home after the bar closed. The police had found him a block away from the building, and when they arrested him, he had a knife on him. Story 33. Years back, I worked as a bartender in a well-known family restaurant, and a table of 3 got seated minutes till close. I proceeded to take their orders to get the ball rolling, and a lady at the table ordered off of the kids' menu. Annoyed, I informed her that you could not order off the kids' menu in the bar, but I would be more than happy to relocate them to the main dining room. She threw a tantrum, so I went and told the manager I was going to ignore the rule to get these people out faster. Went back to take the lady's order, and she said she wanted a kid's hamburger with everything on it. I asked her what specifically she wanted, as the kid's hamburger comes plain. She smugly insisted everything that comes on the burger, obviously. At this point, I'm starting to get calmly argumentative. Because one of this lady had already admitted she was just trying to be cheap, why would I order off the regular menu when the kids' menu is half the price? And 2, she's been incredibly rude the entire time. Her husband tries to step in between our back and forth, and a switch flips. She started screaming and cussing at him so loudly that the entire restaurant, kitchen included, went dead silent. And after a few minutes of this, she goes outside. I apologize, and the husband is very understanding and says it isn't my fault. Shortly after, he went outside to try to talk to her. Maybe minutes later, as I'm cleaning the bar, I see headlights moving out of the corner of my eye. And I turn to look out the window where she was driving her truck in circles, trying to run him over in the parking lot. We called the cops, but she drove off before they got there. They talked to the husband and their +1, as well as the manager on that night, but never came in to ask me anything, and I never heard anything else about it. Story 34. When I was Alberta, I had a guy try and pay for their drinks in US dollars. We explained, "We do not accept US dollars." He started a massive fight. This led to his arrest. This led to him trying to plead the 5th in a Canadian court. Next, he could not understand why Queen Elizabeth II did not show up to court and could not understand how she can press charges on him. As far as I know, he got deported and can never enter Canada again. Story 35. We had an ATM installed at a bar/venue I worked at. Very first night it was in service as we were ushering people out. I noticed a man standing a little too close to the ATM. This man was so plastered, he thought he was at a urinal. To make matters much worse, a door guy ruined over and grabbed him up mid-pee, fire hose spraying anyone and everyone in his way. Story 36. I literally got punched and pepper sprayed in the face at the front entrance lobby of my restaurant in Seattle 7 hours ago while he was initially attacking a Uber driver who had just arrived to pick up a Togo order. Yes, kids and old people got hit as well. Cops took 2 hours to even make it there, been in the industry for over 15 years. Story 37, nightclub in the late noughties. Was working the door during happy hour before I opened my bar for the night. We had 12 bars, so we all did this to meet customers better. And a trashy couple came in with what we assumed was their good friend. They kept getting into minor arguments all night, going from bar to bar, and had clearly pre-gamed and were being sloppy, but we just dealt with it. After a few hours of causing issues for all of us, the 2 men started a fist fight outside the bathroom, and the GF yelled for security to break it up. I just watched that bit from a distance, but as they were being dragged away, the woman collapsed in front of my bar and started bleeding from the nose and ears, completely stopped breathing. Turns out, the other guy overdosed her. I did CPR through a ducking plastic bag for like 10 minutes, AIDS scare, before EMTs got there. They all left, and we thought it was just a crazy night. Then the BF shows back up to pay his tab that he didn't have, looking for her because, get this, he said she shot awake from the defibrillator and jumped out of the ambulance and ran away. Then he picked a fight with a barback, got his ass kicked, and thrown on the sidewalk again. Learned later the other guy was arrested for beating the BF in front of the cops and on camera. All while nightclub atmosphere is going on around midnight. Wild. Story 38. Working at a hotel bar, and a woman asked if she could pray for me. Caught me off guard, but I said, sure, I could use all the help I can get. She proceeds to tell me some of her high-level cliff notes about her life. Later, as I see her leaving an Aussie, catches her interest with his accent. Let me buy you a pint, he says. I really shouldn't, she says, but I guess I can have one. 45 minutes and 3 beers later, she is making out with him at the bar like a high schooler at the drive-in. Can't say I wasn't a little disappointed after all the stories about marriage and religion. Story 39. I work at a dive-ish type bar. Last year during hockey playoffs, I just really wanted to be home already, so I wasn't really into being there. I have 2 patrons, one wearing a coon skin cap. The man wearing the coon skin cap was trying to tell me something funny. At the end of it, he starts to laugh, which turns into a nasty cough, and I swear he coughs out a tooth. He holds his tooth in his hand with a little spittle dripping from his bottom lip. We look at each other, I give a chuckle and shake my head. Geez, man. And just went to the other patron. Bartenders of Reddit. What is the coolest thing you've witnessed a drunk person do at a bar? Story 1. A drunk regular accidentally takes another drunk regular's purse home. She calls him to bring the purse back, they were friends, which he does while eating an ice cream cone. She rhetorically asked where her ice cream was. He proceeds to go to the gas station across the street and comes back with a whole grocery bag full of ice cream cones and not only gives one to her, but to every customer at the bar, and multiple to us bartenders. There was something so adorable about a room full of adults elated to have one giant spontaneous ice cream party. Story 2. Some guy said to me after I'd just served him, "Watch my beer, I'm going out for a cigarette." He then threw the cigarette in the air and caught it in his mouth and walked outside like nothing had happened. Story 3. I watched a completely inebriated 90-year-old Scottish man play the greatest game of billiards I've ever seen at a local pub. He could barely stand or speak but played like a professional. Story 4. I don't know if cool is the best description, but I cut a very drunk guy off one night, but allowed him to sit at the bar to sober up a bit. After a couple of club sodas, he stumbles over to the jukebox to play some music. It was an old jukebox that required you to push 4 digits to play a song. Well, this guy makes his selection, and when he pushed the 4th digit, he pushes himself backwards and falls flat on his back, making a huge scene. Just as I start to make my way over to help his drunk ass up, his song starts playing. It's I Fall to Pieces by Patsy Cline. Perfect. Story 5. As a bartender, the coolest thing I've ever seen a drunk person do is get cut off from being overserved and be totally respectful about. An old regular of mine used walk to the bar, see drink 9 or 10 Jack and Cokes. He never caused problems, would just get a bit sloppy. Every time you told he was done, we would smile, thank me, and pay, and go. That was ducking cool. Story 6. Ex-bartender assistant here. Worked in one of the bigger country bars in Canada. I've seen a fair bit of stupid crap, but the best would have to be a shorter guy step in when a buddy was about to get the crap kicked out of him by another drunk guy, over 6 feet and reasonably built. The shorter guy steps in, blocks the angry drunk, who promptly backhands the shorter guy to the ground. Normally, security would have stepped in by now, but it was a busy night, and they hadn't seen the altercation. Shorter guy stands back up, dusts himself off, and does what I can only describe as a jumping jackhammer punch to the drunk guy's face. Basically, he jumped up and rode the guy down, feeding him what looked to be 5 to 6 punches. Guy was done before he hit ground, broken nose, the works. Unfortunately, both were kicked out due to fighting, but I fought for the shorter guy to stay. Story 7. Not a bartender, but I play old music videos at a bar. There was this extremely drunk dude that came in one night and kept pestering the regulars and requesting some of the dumbest and cheesiest crap ever. I didn't comply. It was funny at first, but it began to get on everyone's nerves because of how loud and obnoxious he was being about it. And at some point, he just gave up and started singing aloud to whatever was on in a little corner. Eventually, he came back up to me, which got on everyone's nerves. Everyone began yelling at him to go home and stop bothering us, but he got up close and whispers, "I'm leaving now. Can you please play Delilah by the sensational Alex Harvey Band?" I indulged him this time, and he began singing like he did, and everyone ignored him. When the chorus hit, though, he jumped up on top of the bar and started dancing and belting it out at the top of his voice. The doorman came barging in, ready to pounce at the guy, and almost as if to protect him, the whole bar erupted in singing and dancing. It was like a ducking movie. The guy went from being the most hated person in the room to the coolest dude there. Everyone ended up buying him drinks, requesting more cool stuff to sing along to, and after quite some time hanging with him, one of the regulars even let him crash at his because he was way too ducked up to even tell a cab driver where he lived. I don't really know the details, but it turns out the guy actually had just gotten back from the courts, where he lost pretty much everything he had worked for his whole life to his wife in a horrible separation. It also turns out he has great taste in music, and he was just trying to request the cheesiest music to get people to sing with him that night. He's now a regular, and I love getting requests from him. He's also found some great friends here and goes out golfing with the rest of the regulars all the time. Perhaps it isn't as cool, but people always talk about the power of music, and I've never seen it work like that before. I've also never seen a crowd's opinion of a person change in an instant like that, and I don't know if I'd ever see something like that again. Sorry again about the formatting. Story 8. A group of guys were being loud and obnoxious assholes in a very full bar, while playing pool and pumping tons of money into the touch tunes, playing their hoobastank or whatever the duck they were playing, being completely disruptive and intimidating anyone trying to use the jukebox. This one random guy sits at the bar right in front of me with his girlfriend and says, "Want to see something funny?" Pulls up the Touch Tunes app and starts playing a bunch of random songs and get cued to the front of the list. Almost everyone in the bar started laughing at the group when Mariah Carey's Christmas album started playing while the bros were yelling at each other to figure out who played the song. Went on for about an hour until they left. Oh, random guy. I wish there were more people like you out there. Story 9. I was a regular poker player at a local establishment. The place was mostly whiskey and cigars, and had an older crowd. I was around 22, but liked the atmosphere, and beating drunk old dudes at poker was what paid my way through dropping out of college. On this particular day, my dad happens to walk in and sit down at the poker table. I didn't know why he was there. He isn't a card player and was never much of a drinker. On this night, he was pretty plastered. He orders another drink and manages to slap down some money for poker chips. I was doing my best to explain the finer points of No Limit Texas Hold'em to him when the action comes to him. Without even looking at his cards, he tosses a handful of chips onto the table, a decent chunk of change. Someone calls. My dad has an ace high flush, cashes in his chips, calls himself a cab home, and buy the table a round of drinks. Story 10. I watched a girl deep throat a beer bottle from the bottom. She fitted all the way up to the neck. It was honestly intimidating. Another time I watched a dude get thrown out. Literally. Out of the corner of my eye, I see movement, and I turn around to see two large bouncers standing at the door and hear a gross sound behind me. It was a dude hitting the sidewalk after being thrown at least 10 feet. He was completely dazed, looked like they'd just about knocked him out. After a few seconds, he sits up and rubs his head as some of us approach, when the door opens and wham! His missing shoe nails him right in the face. No clue what he did, but we got him to a bench and waited with him till someone picked him up. Story 11. This strange kid always came in on Wednesdays around 10 p.m., got a pint of Guinness, drank it, tipped $10 plus the price, said thank you, and left. I always tried to strike up conversation, and he wasn't rude, but I could tell he didn't want to. I always thought he was so cool in an enigmatic way. Story 12. I bartended at a golf course. One day I only had one guy in the bar. He got a gin and tonic, a hot dog, and a slice of watermelon. Put his straw through the hot dog, the long way, and used the watermelon as a garnish. He had 3 of these. Story 13. Not a bartender, but I watched a man eat 40 McNuggets over a 100 kuna $15 bet. 40 McNuggets cost more than 100 kuna. This man is my friend from Herzegovina. Story 14. Followed a guy down a flight of stairs. He could hardly walk. While going down the stairs, he did a complete 360 and never missed a step. I tried it sober and almost killed myself. Story 15. Not a bartender, but my one friend has a gyroscope for a hand. No matter what, he cannot spill his drink. I've seen the kid fall downstairs or trip and fall on the ground and not spill a drop. It's crazy. Story 16. Typical, not a bartender, but I was once at a bar in my hometown on Halloween night. Everyone was in costume. I was on the patio/smoking area, and one dude stood out. He was 6 feet 5 inches and dressed in full super real looking cowboy gear, Stetson hat, jeans, duster, boots with spurs, etc. Just standing in the corner, smoking cigarettes by himself all night. So a bunch of people are on the patio smoking and drinking, and I notice a woman, dressed as a slutty minion or something equally silly, with a cigarette in her mouth, digging through her purse looking for a lighter. Out of ducking nowhere, Cowboy Dan swoops in, flicks open a Zippo, lights her cigarette, tips his hat and says, "Ma'am," and goes back to his corner without another word. It was the coolest damn thing I've ever seen. Story 17. Not a bartender, but a bouncer. The coolest thing I've ever seen someone do at a bar is show up, drink like an adult, and have a good time and get home safely without causing any problem. Responsibility is cool. Story 18. We have live music Friday and Saturday nights. One night we have a small crowd for the solo guitar player, so this group of 5 dudes walking around on a bachelor party comes in and asks for $50 in ones from me after 1 round of drinks. Showers the guitar player and said $1 bills, then tips me out, then they all leave. Story 19. Not a bartender, but at some point my dad and his friend were at a bar, and this midget walks up to the bar and orders a drink. This dude is really ducking short, like 4 feet or something. When the bartender gives him his drink, he thanks him. He tosses some cash up on the counter, and then the rest of the cost of drink in coin. Only he flips the coins up, so when they land on the counter, they're spinning. Finally, he steps up to the counter. With a few quarters in between his fingers, jumps up and slaps his hand on the counter, and the quarters hop perfectly into the tip jar. Then the dude just turns and walks away. My dad and his friend just sat there staring at each other. That guy is probably the smoothest mother ducker alive. Story 20. Fairly tame, but here goes. The restaurant I work at is mostly windows and lies on a main street in between other college/dive type bars. Pub crawls are a common thing around these parts, and we are often entertained at the parade of drunks wandering from one spot to another. We are a bit higher end, so we do not attract those looking for cheap thrills. Anyway, one normal night, I have a party of 3 ladies in the 50 to 70 range, having a nice dinner with a spot of wine and enjoying their night. From my vantage at the bar, I watch as a group of 5 or 6 21-ish aged males walking past the front windows. They weren't the usual drunks, punks, or co-eds, and had they not been so clean-cut, what happened next wouldn't have surprised me that much. When the group reached the spot in the window next to where the ladies sat, one of the fellows turns to his left and licks the window right next to this one lady's face. It happened all of a sudden, and the look on her face was ducking priceless. All of us were in shock, and it took everything in me not to die of laughter. I did the obligatory rush to the door and shake my fist at those darn kids. But it is rather pointless when pretty much everybody in the place, including the ladies, is cracking up. Story 21. I used to work at a golf club. Well, the horn sounded for all the golfers to come in because a storm was coming through. So I've got all these guys in the men's grill drinking and having a good time when the power cuts out. Inky darkness, can't see a thing. The generators turn on after 20 seconds or so, and one of the guys is standing on his chair with his pants down at his ankles and is pulling off his shirt. He gets it off, looks around at the room all staring at him, waits a beat, and says, "Oh, we're not doing this?" The room erupted. It was just perfect. Story 22. Here we go. Maybe not coolest, but definitely most impressive. A couple were outside in the smoking area, trying to duck, but he couldn't get it in because of the angle. She was facing towards him, and those of you who've tried it against a wall like this know it's not easy. So rather than the chick bending over, she decides to, with her back against the wall still, Spider-Man up the corner of it, with her legs spread apart, and gets her pussy in the guy's face, and he goes to town on her, eating her out. This only worked because of the inner wall, in the smoking area, is made of planks of wood, making a sort of ladder. I was in the office at the time, and me and a couple others were just watching this on the CCTV camera, absolutely gobsmacked. I think the best part was a bloke on his own sat in the corner, and when he noticed his phone slowly raised, and I assume he started recording the whole ordeal. Story 23. I used to manage and bartend a very busy Boston Pizza in its city of origin. Boston Pizza is known for Fishbowl Friday, which is 3 shots of liquor, mixed, and served in a fishbowl exactly like these. They're made of glass. Some BPs have switched to a plastic globe-like mug thing with a handle, not schooners, but I digress. This guy at my bar told me he was going to steal a fishbowl. This is a common problem, and I whipped out my manager balls and told him not a chance, and went to decant his drink into a schooner instead. As a preventative measure, his fishbowl is gone. He doesn't have a bag, it's the middle of a very hot summer and therefore no jacket and no bulky clothes. Dude fit an entire fishbowl into the crotch of his skinny jean. He had them sagged, just so. You couldn't tell when he stood up. He got his fishbowl. Story 24. Not a bartender, but best bar story. I was on the road for work in Texas, went into a local bar around the block from my hotel. I sit down, order my drink, and as the female bartender sets it down before me, I see her look over her shoulder. 2 local scumbags were skipping out on their check, and she saw them as they snuck out the side door to the bar. I asked another customer next to me, "Did those guys just run out on their bill?" Nods all around, apparently not the first time. After she had been gone for a couple minutes, I thought I should go check on her. Catch up to the 3 of them a block away, trying to be the hero or at least keep her from being assaulted. She has already confronted them, knocked one out cold, and has the other in full mount and is pummeling his face in. All I could do was stand back and applaud. Walked back to the bar with her, and she bought me a beer and an order of fried pickles for being kind enough to come check on her. I didn't do crap and got a free drink and food for my effort. Thanks again, Courtney. See you the next time I'm in town. Story 25, 2 things. 1. I tended bar in North Mississippi where several famous musicians have called home at one time or another. We had a regular who had been popular in the 50s and 60s, got regular radio play, and others recorded his songs, but was probably more famous for being an influence on the rockabilly movement. Anyway, he could be falling down drunk, barely able to speak or hold his drink, but if he was handed a guitar and guided to the bar stool on stage, he could sing and play like he was sober and 40 years younger. As soon as he would set the guitar down, he would need help to walk off the stage. I've seen him finish playing, hand his guitar to its owner, then fall face first on the floor, out cold. If you're curious who he was, he lent his name to a famous bass player in a band known for wearing lots of face paint and singing about Detroit. 2. I worked with a Czech immigrant who was one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen in my life, and a great bartender. A guy we all knew was in there one night and looked at her and said, "You ever ducked a fat boy from Mississippi?" She acknowledged that she had not, but if he would stick around until last call, that would no longer be the case. He did, and she did. Buzzkill. Both of them are no longer with us, unfortunately. Story 26. Probably a week ago, I saw these 2 guys about to get in a fight. One was this big dude, probably 6 feet 3 inches and 220 pounds, while the other was maybe 5 feet 9 inches and 150 pounds soaking wet. Anyways, they're about to get into it when the small guy's buddy hops in between them and just starts screaming in this thick Canadian accent. "Do you want to go, you ducking bender? I'll break your hoser neck. I've been playing puck since I was in my ma's womb." The other guy, immediately backed down. Ducking classic story 27. One time I let a group of regulars take my car to the gas station. A drunk one asked me if I needed anything and I said gas, and that dude filled the tank. Story 28. Not the coolest, possibly the grossest. I watched this very large man wobbling at the bar, holding on as if he was gonna get thrown out of orbit. I instinctively give him some water and tell him to straighten up or he was out, chugging the water. He just grunted, then started heaving. I slowly backed up and got a bouncer. I'll be damned if I'm cleaning up barf. We watched this man start barfing in his cup. We went over to escort him out, and he was so committed to his sobriety, he told me his barf cup was his drink, then drank it. He drank a cup of barf. Straight-faced, then told us he was sober. I admire his dedication. Story 29. I watched a guy slam a 16-ounce glass of whiskey without stopping. It was a bet he had with his friend. Friend B bought it. If friend A could drink it, not throw it up, and not pass out, then friend A didn't have to reimburse friend B. Friend A partied all night and even had a few more drinks and a rice bowl. Story 30. Guy sitting at bar, close to closing, stuck his hands up through his polo-style shirt, giving the appearance of having very short arms, and started hollering he couldn't reach his drink. Still funny to me, but at the I'm in place, it was hilarious. Story 31. IANAL. But I was at a bar, restaurant with one of those lobster claw machines. Think stuffed animal arcade claw game, but with live lobsters in a tank. Some people have been trying all night with no success. Around midnight, a really drunk guy walks and asks two girls standing next to the machine if they like lobster. They say yes. He puts in $1 and gets one on his first try. Everyone cheers and he says the other girl deserves one too. He puts the first lobster on his shoulder, puts in $1, and gets another lobster on the first try again. He put the lobsters on the table next to the girls, says enjoy, and leaves. It was amazing. Story 32. I used to be a bartender at a restaurant bar that had about 60% regulars in there. One night I was bartending. This big shot guy came in after a round of golf with his buddy. I wasn't familiar with the man, but he was ordering plenty of fancy drinks. Eventually, after they eat, their tab is pushing $150. This lady walks in who is a regular. We'll call her Jan. He gets all excited because he hasn't seen this lady in years apparently. Eventually, he gives me the tab back and orders multiple rounds for the whole bar and hopes to impress Jan. His tab is like $650 by 9 p.m., which is when we close on Sundays. Tips me $300. I was like, duck, yeah, considering he bought me a couple drinks as well, and I'm a broke college kid. Story 33. Maybe not the coolest, but we had a wedding party come in after their wedding, and the bride and groom got into an argument around last call. She threw her wedding ring and a chair at him, and they were both arrested after. That was kind of cool. Story 34. I worked a wedding this past summer, and this one guy, he wasn't all that drunk, but he was definitely tipsy. Was totally mesmerized by my speed and accuracy at making all these drinks at once. He was so blown away, he yelled, "Hey, everyone should give this man $20 right now." One other guy followed through, but it was funny that he even said, and really cool, that someone actually did it. Story 35. This actually happened a few weeks ago. At the bar I work at, there are a few tables that people can sit at, and they have a waitress. So there's a party of like 6 at one of them, and all of a sudden people start cheering. So we look over and one guy is stacking glasses, ketchup, salts, peppers, you name it. Literally anything he could get his hands on, he was stacking. He even had people at other tables donating to his creation. His tower of glassware was about 3 feet tall, to the point where he had to stand on his chair to keep stacking things. I don't think I've ever seen my manager move faster than at that moment. Story 36. University of Arizona about 3 years ago. Guy comes into the bar with his friend. They're doing sake bombs. They're there for a while, then decide to go to the next bar. Friend 1, wait, I can't go yet. I still have a full thing of sake. Friend 2, well, chug it. Me, bartender. Yeah, dude, don't be a pussy. Friend 2, yeah, you're a pussy unless you chug it. Friend 3, starts chanting pussy until he drinks it, slowly getting louder. Rest of bar notices what's going on and joins in chanting pussy over and over again until he drinks the whole thing. He drank it all, then puked. I handed him a mop. Then they went to dirtbags. Story 37. At an Oktoberfest, I was bartending. There was a guy who looked like he'd probably just turned 21, and he was beyond drunk. He walked up to this group of girls and put his arm around one of them and said, "Hey, you're hot." All nonchalant, the girl said, "Get the duck off of me. You're drunk." And the guy started to act like he was going to apologize and said, Hey, whoa, go duck yourself," and walked away. Story 38. Bartending back in my college days at a local dive bar. The place was shoulder to shoulder packed and loud as hell. Out of nowhere, some kid slowly starts to stand on one of the bar stools until he has the posture of a Marine. After a second or two, the entire bar went dead quiet and everyone was looking at him, bar staff included. He then slowly raised a key with a massive pile of coke on it, up to his nose, inhaled, and threw a fist in the air. The entire bar erupted in applause. Usually, if you pull a stunt like that, you'll get kicked out. But something about this kid made it so damn funny that I floated him a few shots on the house instead. Story 39. Not a regular bartender, but I occasionally help in a small bar. One time I was there, it was already late, around 4 a.m. Only a few people inside when a guy enters inside. He was clearly drunk, bare feet and with a small guitar, similar with a ukulele. And at first my boss thought we should get rid of him, but then the dude starts playing with his guitar and everybody starts singing folk songs and everyone asking for more drinks again and again. It was a good night. Story 40. Almost 4 years bartending in a nightclub that isn't always open every weekend, like 2 or 3 times a month. I don't remember something that was really cool a customer did, more like crazy, stupid, or really nice things. So here goes. Not to me, but a guy said to a bouncer that he was doing a really good job, so he handed him a condom as a reward. Best thing I saw was when a guy took a drink from some girl and handed it to me and asked to pay for a new drink for her because he saw some guy put some substances into her drink. He wasn't lying, there was someone that night put it in the drink. I know that because one needed to go to the hospital and they found something in her system. Not sure what it was though. Another time I turned away for like 10 seconds and a guy had somehow jumped over the bar. It's pretty high, like 160 to 165 centimeters-ish, with footsteps and chairs, and he had put his head under the beer tap and was drinking straight from it. I have to admit, I was kind of impressed by his dedication and it was really hard not to laugh. I grabbed him and yelled at him what the hell he was doing, and he spent the entire night apologizing to it. I sterilized the tap after he had been drinking from it. Not sure if it's a cool thing, but just a few weeks back I was out back for a smoke. This was early in the night and really few people there. And a drunk and probably high girl came up to me and asked me for a picture with her. I felt really weird, but sure, I took a picture with her. When I get back inside, a guy I am working with is pulling me into the bar and asking me to watch the girl that asked for a picture with me. I looked at her and she stood there with a guy her age and some old guy was with them. I thought that the guy was her boyfriend because they kind of acted that way. Next thing I know, she turns around and started making out with that old guy. A few minutes later, I see them walking towards the bathrooms, went in there for a long time. Not a drunk person who did this, but on a big night, there were 4 bars open at this club. Some popular band playing. A friend of mine was working there with me, and we had closed and were getting the last people out and starting to clean. One guy, kind of big, probably 190 to 200 centimeters tall and broad, probably in his 40s, stood in the middle of the dance floor and was smoking a cigarette. My friend who was working there too walks up to him and politely asks him to not smoke inside and told him to go outside so he could smoke. The guy is like, yeah, sure, no problem. So my friend continues to clean. A few minutes later, this happens again, and she's still polite and guides him to the door. A third time, it happened the same thing, but she got a little bit pissed. Fourth time, she was so mad that he didn't listen. She's got a big temper. She takes the cigarette out of his mouth, grabs the guy, throws him out the door like it was nothing, and slams the door behind him. She's a small girl, 160 to 165 centimeters tall and skinny. One time I remember this girl who is crazy. Not gonna sugarcoat it. She used to be a regular, and we were in the same middle in high school. She spends the entire night drinking, and she is so drunk I don't think she even remembers coming to the club. In the end of the night, and the band/DJ is gone, and people are just getting ready to leave, and the bar is still open while everyone is leaving, and we are just getting ready to close. She starts yelling at people about how famous she is. She's not. She's got maybe 5,000 to 10,000 followers on Snapchat, but she's not famous. She talks about where she is working and how it is more impressive than just working at a bar. Then she just walks into the kitchen and that she's not leaving unless she gets some complimentary wine bottle or something, and then just walks into the bar and tries to get one herself. Of course, a bouncer lifts her up and just walks with her out of the kitchen and tells her that it's off limits, and now, especially for her since she tried to take a bottle. She then goes up on the tables trying to get everyone to come with her, and how the devil is in this club, and just yells some nonsense and is of course ignored. The bouncers just pick her up and take her outside, and then she spends a good hour banging on the windows and yelling at people about how she's famous, how impressive her job at some makeup store is, and how everyone there is beneath her. Haven't seen her since that night, and this was like 2 years ago. Story 41. Dude was hammered and thrown out of the bar. Guy is with a couple of his buddies trying to help him out/stand him up. Female server comes with a cup of water for the guy, and he starts screaming, calling her a Karen, and to go duck herself. Well, just as his last insult leaves his mouth, his girlfriend pulls around the corner, gets out, and just starts laying into him. Slaps him in the face, calls him an asshole, and leaves. Dude deserved it. And story 42. One of my drunk regulars was a Marine. Said he was special forces. He was so interesting, really, and an art collector. One slow night with only regulars, a super expensive craft beer bar, he brought down a hand-woven rug from Iran. It was an incredible rug, with so much character and depth. He put it on the floor of the bar, and everyone, including myself, took our shoes off and walked all over it to feel how amazing it was on the old feet. Said it cost him $4,000 US. It was neat. When I put my 2 weeks in, he invited us all up. His apartment was above the bar and showed us his collection. He also had pictures on the wall with himself and the living president. Very cool to us nerds. Then he tipped $600 cash for the good time. Great person, but suffered from harsh PTSD that he self-medicated. Hope is okay these days. Story 43. Not a bartender, but a friend of a friend started dancing at bar close one time, then proceeded to stack chairs, stools on all the tables, and she actually did a really good job. Story 44. Was working in a little neighborhood dive bar with a bartender who always spoke about his MMA training and stuff, but the guy looked so pretty I never thought anything of it. I had a studio apartment a few blocks away, so a lot of my neighbors were regulars. Had a new guy move in who was a little off on social interactions, grew up and lived on a sailboat most of his life. If you've met someone like that, you know the type. I meet the new neighbor one day and mention that that's the closest bar, and I work there. A few weeks later, he ends up in the bar. Not a big deal by any means, until he is on his third or fourth drink that night. Guy becomes creepy AF to any female that gets in his proximity. Pretty boy bartender gets a couple heads up from some regulars that creepy neighbor's attention isn't welcome. Pretty boy tells creepy to get himself in check or else he's getting kicked out. Things go well for about 30 minutes after that. Creep's BAC catches up and he starts creeping out a woman who sat down near him. Pretty boy says he warned him and that creepy needs to get out. Creepy pleads to stay and then eventually says he's not leaving. I swear somehow, Pretty boy teleported to the other side of the bar and was standing over Creepy. Creepy stands up and says something like, "You can't make me leave." Never saw any movement from Pretty boy at all. Just suddenly saw Creepy do a flip straight into his back in front of everyone. After that night, I never doubted Pretty boy bartender's MMA abilities ever again. Story 45. This last weekend, 2 guys came up to the bar and ordered 2 double Long Island iced teas without ice. I thought to myself, what the duck? But made them the drink anyway. When they've paid for the drinks, they take the glasses and chug the drinks in something like 4 seconds. I just stood there in awe. They were both kind of sober when they came to the bar, but 10 minutes later, they were completely crap-faced. Story 46. Not a bartender, but a friend of mine. We're out getting drunk at a restaurant where another friend of ours was a server. When it was time to pay, my drunk friend basically frisbee-tossed the checkbook at our server friend across the dining area. That checkbook sailed so perfectly straight right into our friend's chest, where he caught it with a thump and a confused yet impressed look on his face. It was majestic. Story 47. Previous biggest tip was $100 sometime before this guy asked me. Then I said, a lady never reveals something like that. Then I grew a brain and remembered, I'm here to take these people's money. So I later told him $100. So that night, I made $300 off that one table plus $200 from the rest of my night equals $500. Story 48. I lived by a very obnoxious bar that served mostly douchey college kids, think Jersey Shore. There was always the worst music coming out of the jukebox, very loudly, until 2 a.m. I could clearly hear the bar from my apartment and see the entrance from my balcony. The city had been called numerous times and the bar fined, but they kept on doing this. Well, Flannel Condom is a pretty good prankster. I noticed that the bar had this high-tech jukebox that you could use a mobile app to select songs with. After plugging about $30 and getting something like 6 times credit multipliers, I was able to purchase 100+ plays of George Michael's R.I.P. Careless Whisper and promote all of the plays so that someone couldn't skip in front of the plays. So we're talking about a few hours of non-stop Careless Whisper served up from a half block away. I did this at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, brought a 6-pack out on my balcony and enjoyed the crap show. After about an hour, they unplugged the jukebox and the bar was more or less silent the rest of the evening. They struggled to get the same crowd they usually pulled. That $30 I spent cost the bar, I'm guessing, a couple thousand in revenue. Story 49. Guy was sitting at the bar, slamming whiskey and beer backs, and going into the men's room way too often to be merely pissing. Table of 4 comes in, and waitress takes their order. Before the order comes, drunk bar guy walks up to the table and talks quietly to a man at the table. When the man stands up, drunk guy hit him so hard he flew over the next table, lands on floor totally out, and drunk guy walks out past stunned security. Coldest shot I've ever seen. Drunk guy was waiting for the guy ducking his girlfriend. Story 50. My boss told me about this one guy who was so hammered, he went to take a shot and threw back so hard, he leaned the bar stool back and it fell. He didn't throw his arms out or spit the liquor out. He perfectly rolled through to his feet and walked back to the bar and put his shot glass down. She said it would have been way cooler but he took 3 solid minutes of all of his effort to stand his bar stool back up right after doing that. Story 51. Watched a guy get thrown out of the bar just like in the movies. I was out back smoking. The bouncer was a 4 hot dog neck type guy, a giant wall of angry beef. Prior to sailing through the air in a very comical arc, this breathtakingly inebriated patron had decided to grab a little ass, the bouncer's favorite waitress. She was his little muse, and he turned into a teddy bear whenever she smiled at him. I still remember that O-face look the drunk guy had, as his spine flexed backwards and he broke through a wooden rail on his descent to the ground. Then sheets of howling pain. People never forget. Some bouncers are there to fight. Story 52. Not a bartender, but my dad's favorite drinking story. He was out with a couple of college buddies to a sushi place. He doesn't like sake, but his friends hadn't had it, so they ordered it to share. Sake is in a small bottle, inside a larger bottle of hot water. My dad's friends didn't know this, but he did. He watched them drink a pot of hot water and get wasted from it. When one of them is about to pass out, my dad reaches in and takes the sake bottle out of the bigger one. One of his friends asks what it is, and my dad says, "It's sake." He points to their cups and goes, "That's water." They were sober almost immediately. Story 53. One guy comes in, ducked off his head on Gary's, asked for a cocktail, but I insisted he had water in a plastic cup. He obliged and started to do the most twisted ecstasy-fueled dance I've ever seen in my life without spilling a drop. I think you had to be there, but I was impressed. Story 54. So I work as a dish slave at the local nightclub. The coolest thing I've seen someone do was that guy who threw up inside a beer pint, apologized, and left. Didn't have to esky puke off the floor that night. Story 55. I thought this guy was really drunk, so I decided not to serve him. So he walked off and did a perfect backflip in front of me and said, "Can I get a beer now?"